So when we were about to go try the case, they suddenly dropped all the damages claims. So at that point, there was what I would describe as a show trial. They brought in witnesses, they paid, and the judge was making a whole series of evidentiary rulings. Like, for example, he barred the use of the word pollution during the trial. I was not allowed to talk about pollution in Ecuador during the entire trial. He said, if you talk about pollution in Ecuador, I'm going to hold you in contempt of court. But the whole case is about pollution in Ecuador. So I learned firsthand how the legal system can be manipulated by a corporation for its own private purposes to destroy a human rights lawyer, that's me, as a way to evade paying some of the most vulnerable communities on the planet that the company poisons. I kept going with my clients in Ecuador to sue Chevron and other countries like Canada, and then we sued them in Brazil to collect on their assets. When we won that decision, they decided to come after me again. Chevron did through this judge, and they went to him and asked him to impose millions of dollars of court costs on me to reimburse them for their legal fees that they had used to attack me. And when I couldn't, as a human rights lawyer, I was never a person of great means. When I could not pay these fines, they asked the judge to order me to turn over my computer to them so they could examine where my money might be. And I was basically broke at this point. And I told the judge, hold me in civil contempt. I'm appealing your order. Would violate attorney-client privilege, put the lives of my clients in Ecuador at great risk. And I just can't do it. I mean, they were trying to get me to violate my ethical duties to the people who I was representing in Ecuador. So the judge held me in civil contempt. I appealed this crazy order. And while that appeal was pending, he held me in criminal contempt of court. He took his charges to the U.S. attorney in New York City to prosecute me. The U.S. attorney refused to prosecute me, rejected the charges, and then the judge did something that I've never heard of, and frankly, I'm embarrassed about for our whole country. He appointed a private corporate law firm to prosecute me in the name of the U.S. government.
I didn't know you could do that.
I didn't know you could either till it happened. Actually, you can't do that, but he did it anyway because it's illegal. And the crazy part is I learned 6 months later, the judge never disclosed that the law firm, the name of the law firm is Seward and Kissel. It's a small kind of oil and gas law firm. They had Chevron as a client. I was essentially being prosecuted directly by Chevron in the name of the U.S. government. And the first thing they did on a misdemeanor is something that has not happened to one lawyer in our history. They locked me up pre-trial on a misdemeanor contempt that was bogus to begin with. They slapped an ankle bracelet on my leg. I live in Manhattan in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had to go home, and I could not leave my home except for like legal meetings and stuff for 2 years and 2 months. When the maximum sentence was only 6 months had I been convicted. And what worries me as a advocate, as someone who speaks out against injustice, like you do, is this is a playbook that I believe the oil and gas industry in particular, but also other industries like the pharmaceutical industry, will use against those who are a little too successful in holding them accountable for their wrongdoing. By the way, the pollution down there, when you were there in the 80s, it was bad. It's now called by experts the Amazon Chernobyl. It's considered probably the worst pollution in the world right now. And it's been sitting out there in this isolated part of the world for decades. Very few people know about it. And while I'm telling you my story, okay, because this is very personal to me and my family, okay, it's been really hard. I just want to say that the people of Ecuador, many of them have died. I would say thousands have died. We don't know the exact number because Chevron will never fund a study to find out. But there have been so many people I've met over the 30 years I worked on this who have perished because of cancers and other diseases created by exposures to these toxins that they deliberately dumped out of pure greed into the rainforest that are still sitting out there decades after they started. It's embarrassing that our government allows this kind of thing to happen. And not only allows it to happen, I mean, we were litigating for years in Ecuador. The U.S. Embassy, okay, in Quito, was almost completely on the side of Chevron. They looked at the Ecuadorians who were trying to bring the case to clean up their ancestral lands as some sort of problem. You know, so the U.S. government has become so, and I saw this with my own eyes, so pro-corporate with this kind of thing that it's very difficult for the government to be considered a neutral party anymore. And I know you had this experience with a lot of your work in the environmental field, with the vaccines and the pharmaceutical industry. In my experience, Chevron has so much control right now over this element of the judiciary that they literally are not paying a judgment they owe to 30,000 people who are at imminent risk of death because of the power they have over the US government. And it's just not fair. And they tried to shut me up. They tried to silence me. They thought I would go away. They're still trying to intimidate me. But the reality is I'm not shutting up, because people need to know that this happens. And the only thing that's left to do from the Ecuadorian communities is to get a team of lawyers to go enforce the judgment against their assets in other countries. And I'll add that I can't leave this country. I've been a hostage in the United States for 5 years. I have not left the country for 5 years because Chevron had the judge confiscate my passport on the grounds that I hadn't turned my computer and confidential case file over to their lawyers. Even though I'm not detained anymore, and I spent 993 days detained, I'm not really free. I don't have the same rights as a typical American citizen. I don't have a passport. They took my law license without a hearing. They literally went into my bank accounts and wiped them out without even telling me. Suddenly you end up with all the resources you thought you could always count on for your future, for the future of your son, your family. They just went away. I mean, they went away overnight. And the reality is they could lock me up any day they want. All they have to do is go back to the judge and say he still hasn't turned over his computer. Why don't you charge him with a new criminal contempt? So I live, with this sort of situation that's almost unfathomable for a country like the United States of America.